Hey, good morning to those of you in the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. Do me a favor for somebody, if you could throw in the chat, let me know that you can see this and it's live on LinkedIn. I usually watch on my phone to see that things are going fine. And right now I just got a little hiccup on LinkedIn that I'm not able to see it. So let me know I'm live on LinkedIn. That would be awesome. I think I know I'm live on YouTube. And we're going to get started in just a second here about overcoming federal buyer objections for large primes and agencies. Sometimes we go in as a small business and we get hit with this, sometimes I call it arrogance, but other times it's just flat out objections. And maybe the person doesn't realize what they're doing. But perfect. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Russ. Appreciate it. So I won't see myself. I won't be able to see any of that, but I can deliver the content, and that's why you're here. So I'm excited about that. So again, today we're going to be talking about how to overcome those buyer objections. But at first, if you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live, where I deliver process and procedures, success tips in the federal market. Just want to turn off this guy here. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow the process from A to Z, we'll achieve the expected results. We'll have predictable results, and that's what I want for you. Before we get started, do me a favor, and thanks for those, I can see you. Before we get started, just do me a favor and help me and buyers remember who you are. Put your company name, your core competency, 2 or 3 words into the chat, and just help us remember. Make it easy for buyers to remember you and for me to remember you, but also make it easy for people who are in the community with you. In that chat is where the community is. Help them understand. And actually, as long as we're going at it, because I only do this occasionally, right? I say don't lead with your tags, lead with your capabilities. But go ahead and throw your tags in if you're a HubZone, woman-owned, veteran-owned, or 8A firm. One of those 4 programs. Throw it into the chat, because I just want to remind ourselves. And when my team goes and documents some of who's showing up, we can actually put that next to you. And then the last thing is engage with everybody else in chat. As we go forward, I do the training. I'm bringing you this knowledge, and I'm positive I'm going to deliver nuggets of wisdom for you, actionable steps that you can take. But I'm also delivering to you this community of people just like you in the government contracting space where you can meet them. Maybe there's a federal buyer in here, a large prime, but more often than not, there's small businesses just like where you're coming from, and you guys might find a common reason to connect. Okay, so I'm going to dive in. I tend to go at a full speed approach, as you know. But when I go into today's training is about overcoming objectives that objections that you might run into at an agency or even a large prime. I want to talk about that today. And before we get started, just thinking about what this might look like, right? From my perspective, when a large business goes into an agency, like Microsoft, for example, they're going into that meeting and they're almost never met with objections, right? They're rarely met with any kind of objections of any sort. And the buyer, whoever, is just looking to them and waiting for that wisdom to come in. The customer, the teaming partner, looks at these people, like from Microsoft, as they're the experts. And I want to hear what they're saying. So this first impression credibility comes from the Microsoft name. I used to run into people from Microsoft, Lockheed, or whatever. I'm like, well, try it without your business card, right? So this first impression credibility, the credibility you get just the first time you're in there, is coming from the company name. You're borrowing that credibility. As a small business, we don't have that name recognition, right? And we're starting from scratch. We get met often with things like, how many employees do you have? Or maybe they're saying, how much revenue are you making? Somebody might say, how many customers or prime contracts do you have? And they're diving right into tell us about your experience. And I'm talking about like at the beginning of the meeting, are you on this contract vehicle or that contract vehicle? Or if you say something about your staffing, something I heard from somebody else that gave me this whole training idea today, they said, well, tell us about your staffing approach. Well, how do you do that with your staffing? I mean, they're just like picking it apart. And you don't get that when you're seen as a subject matter expert, in particular from the borrowed credibility of like Microsoft. I want to teach you how you can sit there and begin to avoid these questions. Do me a favor in the chat, if you have other ways that people somehow express a similar way of objections or stonewalling you a little bit, or even that arrogance, right? I don't want to complain in the chat, but definitely put in the chat if there's other ways that you see this coming to fruition when you go in. There's a line in sales that says that we say, if they're talking about price, then you haven't proven the value yet, right? So you can say whatever you want. If the customer is talking about price, then the value hasn't been proven. If the value can be proven to a certain point, they're not going to care what the price is, because the trade-off is well worth it to them. And it's similar if they're talking about risks, right? How many employees do you have is kind of a risk about how many people can you put on the team. It's like, well, who cares? When I hear about the project and I understand the project, I'll put the right people on, whether I have them or I hire them, right? But them asking you is kind of like this objection. And so if they're asking about these type of risks, I would submit that you haven't proven your company's subject matter expertise status. Not just yours, right? You might be an expert in this core competency, but you haven't proven the company's subject matter expertise. But how can you if they keep pushing questions? And so I want to help you kind of help put them a little bit in their place for a second as you get a chance to talk about your company, talk about why your company is an expert in there. And so in today's training, I want to talk to you about shifting authority. When you walk in, sometimes you're kind of feeling like the authority is here. The customer is up and you're down. And we talk about balancing authority and then shifting authority to you. You can think about it as going to a parent-teacher conference. If you go to a parent-teacher conference, the teacher sits like on the edge of the desk looking at you, and where do the parents sit, right? Whether you have kids or not, I don't go to parent-teacher conferences, but I've watched enough movies, right? The parents get stuck in those teeny little chairs and they're sitting down in the kid's chair, and the teacher is sitting up on the edge of the table. And that might be a 26-year-old teacher, right? Young professional talking to some 40-year-old, 50-year-old parents. They're having conversations, but that teacher has the authority. And what I want you to do is to begin to shift the authority with your customers. I want you sitting on the desk and I want them sitting in the little chairs. Still respectful. Both people still respect each other at the meeting or at the parent-teacher conference, right? Both people still respect each other. You have just shifted the authority, right? And they begin to see you as the trusted authority in there, and they begin to lean in and listen more. When you go and you see a 26-year-old teacher, you don't look at her and go, well, she's a young teacher. You look and go, she's the teacher. Whenever she says go, that's why I'm sitting here and Johnny's waiting in the hallway, kind of thing. The teacher's the boss. Well, we want to kind of do that same thing with you. And today's training's around that. And so if you get what I'm saying, if you want to be seen as an expert in your customer's eyes, you want to shift that authority, put authority shifting into the chat. Let me know you understand this idea of shifting the authority. So authority shifting into the chat. Okay, so I got 4 main things I want to talk to you about today. And just giving you a heads up, top 4 things that customers care about, buyers, top 4 things large primes care about, because we have similar type challenges with objections when we go in there. So that's the second thing. Third thing I want to talk about is what you can do to overcome objections, how you can overcome objections in preparation or through preparation, what you can do before you even get to a meeting to encounter that objection. And then the fourth one is how to address objections when they come up in a meeting. In sales, we always say, and risk management is the same way. If you're not familiar with risk management, a risk is, imagine a risk is, the risk is I might trip, right? And I can do 3 things with that risk. I can accept it. When I trip, I just fall and I accept it, right? I can mitigate it. If I trip, I can swing my arms and try to get back to balance, right? Or the third thing is I can avoid that risk. I can sit there and remove the things that are in my way. I could learn to walk better so I don't trip. There's things I can do to avoid that risk. Not all risks can be avoided. Not all risks can actually be mitigated. But it's important to understand objections are just like risks. You can accept the objection when they say your price is too high, for example, or you can mitigate it by trying to talk to them about, no, it's not too high. Let me talk more about the value or something. Or you can avoid it by never letting price even come into their mind, because they're so busy thinking about how great your solution, product, services, et cetera, are going to be to their needs. And that's what we want to do in sales, right? With the federal government in particular, understand their mission, understand their challenges and objectives, and to begin to talk your solution through weaved in with those challenges, et cetera. Okay, so let me talk to the top 5 things buyers care about. I'm just tracking my time. The first thing, in no particular order, right? And these aren't the only things they're concerned about. I just picked the top 5 that I see happen a lot. And as I'm going along, if you don't hear yours, throw it in. I'd love to see what other people run into. But the first one is buyers want you to be procurement ready. So they're looking for you to be procurement ready. I'm primarily talking about small business specialists and contracting officers here when we start talking about it, but even, of course, the program office. But the program office, I have actually found, tends to be they tend to throw up objections far fewer times, and they get more engaged. When you come in, they wanted you to come in, and so they get a little bit more involved, where contracting officers and small business specialists tend to deal with a lot of small businesses that perhaps aren't procurement ready. And so they got their guard up. I'm not saying it's right, and I'm definitely not saying it's wrong, but there's ways for us to deal with it. So they want to see procurement readiness. So when you think about that, procurement readiness means if you're going to try to get a prime contract with the agency, well, have you done any federal work before, as an example? Are you in SAM? You got some of these basic things? Are you on the contract vehicles we use? Whatever it is, all of it begins to increase that perceived procurement readiness going up. The next thing, number 2, for top things buyers look for is past performance. The next 2 are past performance. This one's past performance as a prime managing teams. So if you're going after a contract and it's going to be several $1 million, right? Or $50 million, $100 million, they want to know that you've got experience as a prime contractor managing contracts that have subcontractors on those on that contract. So you're using subcontractors, small businesses and larges, right? You could have Booz Allen on your team. Do you understand how to manage those people? You can think about it from the construction world of general construction or general contracting or general contractor. This person is over the entire contract construction project, building out a hospital or whatever. And then there's these subcontractors for plumbing or electrical or whatever. It's the same thing when you think about a prime contractor. The government is looking to know that you have the ability to manage a contract, not just the team, right? But maybe the team you're forming also are people you've worked with before. Those things begin to mitigate their concern about past performance and can you manage a contract. The next past performance, number 3 here, is do you have past performance that demonstrates clearly that you're a subject matter expert? And when you think about objections, right, they might say, well, Microsoft's an expert in SharePoint. Let me use this as a real world example. When I had my last company, in my eyes, we were better than Microsoft at Microsoft SharePoint because we did it exclusively as a company and we did it exclusively in the federal government. There was Microsoft experts that they had that charged $400 or $500 an hour. But those guys were like on all different kinds of customers, state and local, commercial, but we were heads down in DoD. We brought the past performance and the experience in there, and we had the same certifications as the people working for Microsoft. And so we were able to demonstrate that we had past performance as a subject matter expert in similar situations. So if I'm going to the Air Force, and I've done this in other places in the Air Force or the Army, that's a similar situation. In DoD, I have the experience. And we have the experience doing it with 100,000 users or building out a building that's 500,000 square feet or whatever size buildings are, and so demonstrating that. And when you think about that being an objection in their head, also, as I'm going through, these aren't just objections they'll say to you, they're sitting in their mind, they're wondering about it, et cetera. And what I mean by heading it off, and I'll talk about it in a minute on how you prepare, but you want to talk to these ahead of time because you know that these are the concerns they have. Number 4, talent retention. This is a big deal for federal buyers. If you get a contract, one of the concerns they're going to have is talent retention. It's why you want to say, hey, we got a 97% retention rate. And then maybe even be able to talk to how do you have that retention rate? What do you guys do to maintain that retention rate? And so talent retention is a big deal for the federal government because if you're getting people on the contract, they want to know they're going to stay there. If the government is spending money to help Jane learn the ins and outs of their program, then they don't want Jane to just go because she's unhappy. And if the company can't keep people, then that's bad for the customer. And so that's a concern, a risk that they're worried about. And number 5 thing that a buyer might care about that you should be thinking about ahead of time and addressing is they want to know that you care about them, right? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And the way that you can demonstrate that you care is to be able to talk about their organization, when you're coming in, what you say is weaving in language from their very strategic documents, right? They need to know that you understand the mission. I had a customer last week, again, same kind of thread that got me to do this training, but they said they've walked into meetings where one of the first things the person on the other side said, well, tell us what you know about us. It's like, okay, well, is this a test? But that's a very legitimate question, right? And they shouldn't have had to ask it, is my opinion. They should have known you already do know about them because of the way you start talking or something. And we can talk about that another day, but they want to know that you care. This is a big deal. That's an objection. You guys don't even know what we do. You don't know what our mission is. Do you know who we support? Do you think we're just an IT shop, or do you realize that we're an IT shop in the VA who supports the veterans' healthcare? And we not only make sure they get good healthcare, but sometimes our solutions, our IT solutions, are a matter of life and death down at the very hospital and in the OR, et cetera, which is real scenarios for me when I had my last company, right? Supporting the VA all the way down to the thread. Understanding the mission is how you begin to address objections or concerns that they have about you don't care about them. Okay, so that's the buyer. The next one is, by the way, if you understand what I'm talking about with the buyer and you understand the value of demonstrating that you're a SME, for example, and show the past performance, just put SME into the chat. Let me know that you understand that the buyer is looking for you to be a subject matter expert. So SME, put SME into the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that. And let's go into the top 5 things that larges care about. I paused there long enough so all of us could get water. Okay, and this kind of goes a little bit of my opinion of the order, but my opinion is shaped by talking with numerous large buyers and what they look for. So number one thing is financial stability that I put in my list, right? The number one thing I have in my list, financial stability. They want to know that your company is financially sound. If they can't get the government to pay them for a certain portion of time, and then it takes a little bit longer to pay you, they want to know that you're able to pay the salaries of the people in your company, of the people who are on the contracts with your large teaming partner. So financial stability is really important. They want to know that you've got a line of credit that can go to $1 million, $5 million, depending on the size of contract. You really need to be able to pay your people's salaries for 3 to 6 months if the government doesn't pay you. That's wrong, right? There's all sorts of rules in place actually that say you can't take that long to pay a small, but what if they did, right? So larges have a legitimate concern about making sure that the whole project doesn't get thrown into disarray because you don't have financial stability or backing. And by the way, there's tons of people who will give you the financial backing if you have contracts. The next one, number 2, is talent acquisition. This is a concern that large primes have. They want to know that you have a strong, you have ability to find and recruit and hire and get in place the people needed for their projects. So if they're doing a project with the Army and they're teaming with you and they say you got 25 people on the contract or 10 people, they want to know that you can fill those positions and you can do them quickly. So there's no empty time. The government is looking to the prime every day those positions are empty. Sometimes, and this is a legitimate concern because larges sometimes put a small on the contract, and the small turns to the large and says, hey, can you help me hire people? I sure can, as soon as I hire the 5,000 that I'm looking to hire, right? And so it's important for you to be able to both understand the need for talent acquisition and then communicate it to them that you guys got a strong process, et cetera. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The process goes right to number 3. They want to know that you have process in place. I have a friend, Tim, who talks to me, and I feel like every time we talk, he's the way he measures teammates, small business teammates, is he's looking to see, do you have process in place? Process around proposal writing. If I'm going to put you on my team, do you guys actually have a process for how to turn around a data call, get us the information we need in a timely manner? Do you actually have a process for getting an NDA signed? An NDA should be a 24-hour or less turnaround. If it takes a long time and it's bouncing around, no one knows what's going on, that means you don't have a process. If you don't have a process for an NDA or a data call type thing, then my concern is that you don't have processes for anything down the road. This often comes up with companies that have process certifications too, like ISO or something, which is bad, but it's a legitimate concern they have. If you're squared away, if your company is squared away, then you want to be able to communicate that. That's how you avoid that objection, is you'll address it. You'll know that they're concerned about process, and you will make a point of talking about that from the back office. And hopefully I'll mention that in a second. Number 4, niche. Do you have a solid niche that you can contribute to a large? So when we're thinking about top 5 things large primes are concerned about, they want to know that you have a niche. You're not coming in saying, I do everything in IT or I do everything in construction. They want to know that you're coming in being the best at something, right? So I'm working with a customer, best at cybersecurity. They got solid past performances around it. They come in and fill any task area or an entire cyber contract, and they're willing to be part of a team. They can communicate their niche easily, and you need to be able to do that. That's why I keep asking in the chat, what are your 2 or 3 core competency keywords? Put those things in there. So do me a favor, if you understand niche and how important it is to be focused in order for people to see where you fit into their team, put niche into the chat. Let me know that you're tracking with what I'm saying. Niche, niche. And by the way, it's niche, not niche, in my opinion, because it's riches in the niches, not riches in the niches. Okay, let's go to number 5 on the large primes. Agency intimacy. Large primes are concerned about whether you have any kind of inside knowledge. That's what they're looking to find in there. So in the beginning couple of tips, it's about your company's stability. Then the last 2, it's about your company's contribution, the value proposition, if you will. So agency intimacy is this understanding the agency. Do you understand the Navy? Do you understand NAVWAR coming down? Do you understand PEO digital? Do you understand the certain task areas, technical function areas? Do you understand those areas, the people that are in there, what events they have? The largest can't be everywhere. And so when they look to a small, that's one of the things that they look for, is whether they've got somebody like you has got agency intimacy to go along with the niche. Okay, cruising along. I got 9 minutes and I got a whole other half of the slide to go. But hopefully you're tracking on this stuff. I want to talk about how do you overcome objections through preparation. First thing is just engage, right? So when I talk about preparation, I mean, what can you do before the meeting to begin to prepare yourself to avoid any objections that happen in there and to position yourself well. So engage with meeting participants before the meeting. If you've got a meeting with John at Booz Allen, as an example, or Jane at Navy, begin to engage with them. If you can engage with them on LinkedIn, that's awesome, because you take a couple of weeks to begin to get them aware of who you are by maybe following them one day, giving a thumbs up to one of their posts another day, tagging them, completely relevant tag another day. So if you can get them on LinkedIn, that's perfect. That's called social selling. And now you're engaging them. Other ways to engage them, though, is you can shoot them a quick email. Hey, we're having a meeting next week. I just wanted to send you this this white paper, this case study, this capability statement, whatever it is. I just wanted to put this in your lap before we came in. Something else you might be able to do with engagement beforehand, where you're basically warming up this person, this contact, before you meet with them, is you just ask a quick question. This is one of my favorite things to do. Is I love calling somebody and saying, hey, John, you and I got a meeting next week. Do you mind if I take just 5 minutes and ask you 3 quick questions as I prepare for next week? John's going to love it. Plus, John's going to give me 3 quick answers, right? Try that someday. My answers are totally related to what I want to know going in, but I don't wait for the meeting. I actually try to reach in. And maybe that call goes to 5, 10, 15 minutes. But during that call, because I'm calling on an informational purpose, hey, John, can I get some information really quick? Can I prepare for the meeting? He's like, oh my gosh, yeah, somebody's preparing for a meeting. John's not thinking about any objection he might have that just naturally come up in the nature of a first meeting. And so then when I get to the meeting, I'm able to say, John, thanks so much for talking to me last week. I was able to prepare more, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. And what this is the subject matter expertise, and we're able to dive into the meeting, avoid some of these objections. Okay, so if you understand all that about engaging before the meeting with their content, throw engage into the chat while I tell you the next tip. So engage in the chat if you understand about engaging with the person you're going to meet with before the meeting. The next thing you do is post content on social media. This could be a video, like this. It could be a webinar. It could be a podcast. It could be an article. It could be a post on LinkedIn. You could take an Amazon post, for example, or Otis Elevators. You could take something they wrote, share it out, say, hey, I thought you guys would be interested in this, especially Navy. And you're giving credit to Amazon or Otis, but you're writing it. And so in people's eyes, it's coming from you. And they're thankful that you made them aware of other people's information. If you're doing this kind of stuff on social media platforms, LinkedIn in particular, LinkedIn or YouTube, when people are looking and getting ready to meet with you, they will begin to build their own level of knowing, liking, and trusting you through the content you're putting out there. So post content. Another little tip is know how many open positions are at a large company. This one in particular is about a large company. If I go in to meet with, and this is addressing an objection, this is why I threw this in. Somebody told me they actually had somebody ask about their talent acquisition, hiring people, right? Their talent acquisition approach. And they said, we do this, this, this. And then the person actually hit them again. And I say it this way because I think it's an unfriendly way to meet. They're like, well, how can you do that? That just seems impossible. Like they're doubting them, throwing trust in. And really, it was just a poor way of asking questions. They don't probably really trust. But it was a large company asking. And what I was telling my customer is that company itself has 5,000 open positions. I would be answering it in such a way that I might sit there and say, well, you know what? Before this meeting I came in, I noticed you guys have 5,000 open positions. And so you guys must totally relate with what we do. And so we have a process in place that moves this way, this way, this way. What's your guys' process? Maybe we can learn some tips from you and like putting it back on them. But the way you can put it back on them is by knowing what the position is. You're not trying to be confrontational, but you're trying to shift that authority and say, come on, stop asking me about recruiting. Recruiting is a challenge for government, for large primes and small businesses. For all of us, it's a normal just challenge. And we've got a process that's in place. Last thing is role play your meetings. In this one, I'm talking about prepare a call plan. You're going to go in and then talk to your colleagues or friends and say, hey, can I just role play this really quick? I want to introduce the company. I want to start the meeting and kind of keep control of it. I don't know if Gus can do this fast, but I have several videos about how do you control meetings? How do you control it with a large? How do you control it with a prime, with a sub? And so there's these tips on controlling it. But if you role play, you can begin to practice, where can I come in and shift the authority? Where can I at least come up to equal authority so we're both sitting on good chairs and not sitting in little teeny kid chairs? Okay, so I had a whole bunch of others about how you can address objections during meetings. I don't have enough time, but I want to just tell you them really quick. So apologize for how fast it'll be. But the first thing is, when I'm in a meeting, how can I overcome objections or avoid them? First thing is, I'm going to explain the use of a call plan. Go watch my training on call plans. But I'm going to say, hey, this is the purpose of the meeting from my perspective. And I wrote these 10 questions down. I'd like to go through this. When I do that, it makes the other person stop thinking about what they're thinking. And they almost start thinking about, well, what are those 10 questions? Let's go through them. A second bullet that I had here is confirm the purpose at the start of the meeting. So at the beginning, you want to say, hey, I'm looking to sit there and introduce our company and briefly cover our organizational maturity, our core competency, and then talk about our past performance. So that's one way to say it, is just let them know. I'm going to talk about the back office. I'm going to talk about what we do, and I'm going to talk about who we've sold it to. And then the third thing, last one, is speak directly to the objections. I might say something when I walk in with a large prime that, hey, I often talk with other larges and they appreciate about hearing about the strength of our back office. You know, how stable are we as a vendor and a partner to you? So I thought I'd start with that, if that's okay. I'm trying to head off those objections going, I know you got this concern, this concern, this concern. Let's just talk about it, right? Let's not avoid it. And so that's my recommendation for you on that. I know it's a fire hose of information, but it works really well when you track on this stuff. So in today's training, I talked about knowing customer objectives and how to avoid them by respecting them. So you can avoid objections by actually respecting that they exist and they have a right to exist, right? And if you're running into them with your customers, it's not because they're a bad person. Certainly it's not because of you. I would submit that if you're running into objections, it's because of the process you have around meeting preparation and maybe how you execute on the meeting. Just work on those things, work on the process and how you start how you do meeting preparation, and you'll start having better meetings. So a lot of information. Hope you found your nuggets in here. If you did find value in today's training, do me a favor, throw thanks in the chat. We always appreciate that. Remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It is just a process. Part of the process is coming on back. I'll see you at the next training.